Welcome back to an episode of Clutch Gene Sports and Rohan Chakravarti's channel. How's it going, my man?
I'm doing good, man. I mean, we have back-to-back shows, it seems like, for the first time in a while, but that just makes it all the more fun.
It's just been actually, you're not wrong. Like, we haven't done two shows in a week in, man, who knows how long. And back-to-back days, that's honestly, it might be a miracle that's happening right now in front of us, especially because it's the NFC West rankings, and we're not talking strictly 49er football. But man, before we even get into that, the New York Knicks, bro, they
Yeah.
re-signed OG Anunoby. They traded for Mikal Bridges. That team is going to be a very hard team to beat. What are your thoughts yesterday when you saw that? What were your thoughts? I know you're into college sports, so you know like the Villanova history and you're into that stuff. So what was your thoughts initially?
I mean, I was just like, wow. I mean, you've heard rumors, but I didn't expect it to happen, and especially of a trade of that magnitude with the amount of picks involved. That Knicks team, though, is really good, especially with them keeping Anunoby. The depth and the top talent on that team. That top 7 is really, really good. I don't know exactly how that team is gonna fill out now, but that's a good team. That's a good team for sure.
Well, and they
I mean,
still
I'm
have,
very excited to
I
see
be-
how they go.
I believe the Knicks have like a few draft picks in the first
Mhm.
round too, so they could essentially even get better by getting a center or whatever. But that's not what today's show is about. So on today's show, we will be discussing the NFC West rankings. We'll be going over the first. We'll do the head coaching rankings, quarterback rankings, and then team overall. We're going to get into position by position, but we'll be here for a very long time doing that because it's four teams in the NFC West. Now, the NFC West used to be a extremely dominant division. Now that it's kind of starting to even out a little bit, it's not as dominant as it used to be. But let's get straight into it, man. Obviously, so for those of you guys who are not familiar, the Seattle Seahawks, they hired Mike McDonald. He was the defensive coordinator of the Ravens last year. They also hired Ryan Grubb. He was the OC at Washington University of Washington. Believe he went over to Alabama for a brief stint. But as soon as Mike McDonald got hired, he left Alabama, so he was there for about a month or so. The Cardinals are on second year head coach, Jonathan Gannon. Their offensive coordinator is Drew Petzing, and Nick Wallace is their defensive coordinator over there. The Los Angeles Rams have Sean McVay, Mike Little LaFleur, and then Chris Shula, the first year defensive coordinator. And then the 49ers, obviously, they have head coach Kyle Shanahan. Their offensive coordinator is no one. It's obviously Kyle Shanahan. They have a run game coordinator, Chris Forrester, and then defense coordinator, first year, Nick Sorensen. So as we get into this, Rohan, let's go ranking the fourth. So we'll go the worst to best, right? So the fourth person or fourth ranked head coach to the first. I'll let you go first on this one.
Yeah, so if we're going one by one, I think the fourth is going to be the newest, and it's no shade at him. Obviously, an unproven head coach, and he was a really good D coordinator. I'm going to go with Mike McDonald. Haven't seen him in the head coaching realm, and really, to me, this is more of an indication of where I kind of see the third guy compared to the fourth guy, and how he kind of changed my
Okay.
perception. But my fourth guy was right now is Mike McDonald. New guy, unproven. We'll see how he does in a head coaching capacity. How does he do managing a team? And how does he do? Because more importantly, a lot of things defensive head coaches are scrutinized about is their offensive head coach or their offensive coaching selection. I remember earlier in the cycle, Raheem Morris, he was talking about how they're not only wanting to know about you, they're wanting to know what kind of offensive staff are you going to bring, and who do you think could even replace them down the line if they get a head coaching job. And so I think that there's a lot of pieces definitely that you're curious to see how they end up falling in Seattle. Gonna go with Mike McDonald as my fourth guy.
Wow, I'm interested. I'm curious on why. Like, 'cause obviously, I'm guessing who your number three is going to be. Is going to be. So I'm kind of curious on what the explanation on that one is. I actually have my fourth um, head coach ranked is actually Jonathan Gannon. The reason is I thought Jonathan Gannon did a good job his first year as a head coach. Thought he managed things well, especially with their quarterback situation, not necessarily having a quarterback. Offense looked well, defense played good enough, but I don't think Jonathan Gannon is going to last long in Arizona. I'm not sure on his approach, on how he interacts with some of these players. Obviously, we've seen some of the behind the scenes and how he used like the pew 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 firework method with, like, to me, like, it just seemed a little childish. And then when I'm watching Jonathan Gannon on the sideline, like, he doesn't seem like a head coach material. Like, I never see him going over and trying to like explain things to players, X's and O's or anything like that. It's constantly just him staying away. And I don't know if it's because he's trying to take on that head coaching role because when you, like you said, as a defensive coordinator becoming a head coach, you have so much that you have responsibilities of the offense, defense, special teams, game management, stuff that you normally wouldn't do. So I don't know if he's trying to take the back seat of like old coaches who they were coordinators and became a head coach, where they're like, you know what, I need to have my hands on everything. But I think he's my fourth ranked coach right now, and my guess is he's your third. Am I right?
Yeah, Jonathan. Yeah, we're good. Jonathan Gannon is my third, actually, compared to what do you call it? Compared to Mike McDonald. Excuse me. Yeah, I have him at three.
Okay, and what's your explanation for Jonathan Gannon? I know you said you had expectations for him as his first year, and then you were like, well, he's kind of changed my mind a little bit on him. What changed your mind about him?
Yeah, I think to me, Jonathan Gannon initially was skeptical. You saw the awkwardish type of interactions. He was also, you know, I was a little skeptical of his defensive approach, which was his forte, right? In Philadelphia, I was skeptical of his defensive approach because of the personnel in Philly. You didn't really think that they were kind of when you have two man corners on the outside, you didn't think that the quarter system, a system with a lot of cover four, a system where you kind of play a lot of off coverage was kind of the right way to go. But the reason that I'm not necessarily, the reason that I'm a little higher, maybe on Jonathan Gannon than initially, I thought they ended the year well. And what I mean by that, I don't necessarily mean in terms of scores and things like that. I thought they played competitively in the second half of the year after they got back. They got Kyler Murray back. In the first game Murray played, you see them beat the Atlanta Falcons in a close game. But when you look at it, a lot of their games at the end of the year were fairly close. They had a close game against Atlanta, a close game against Houston, a close game against Pittsburgh. The one against the 49ers kind of got out of hand where it was a 16-point game. They were scoring, though. They made that one competitive. They beat Philadelphia, a close game against Seattle. That kind of, to me, gave me some optimism where you see a team where you know that they aren't really having a successful season. At one point, they were 1-8, but they find a way to end up, pulling things out and being a little more successful. They go 3-5 the rest of the way with a couple of close games, a couple of close losses, and that to me, I thought was a little impressive. And while we don't necessarily, I mean, you're obviously not in the building every day, and we don't necessarily see the day-to-day interactions. To me, when you have a team fighting like that, especially a team like the Arizona Cardinals, where you're trying to search for the overall talent that competes with the other teams, that was something that impressed me. I also thought the defense, played a little better towards the end of the year. Specifically when you talk about their passing defense, I thought it was a little better, towards the end of the year. And you can look at stats and things, and stats can be skewed for sure. Because obviously when the Cardinals are down, teams are going to run the ball more than they pass the ball against them. But they had a top 15 pass defense last year in terms of yards given up and things like that. And I think that there are things that you can be optimistic about as that team kind of gets better. So to me, it's still more of a wait and see. But I thought at the end of the year, things impressed me about Gannon to where I can put him at third.
Okay, I get that, because the explanation, like, you're going off of what you saw, like the experience, like it wasn't as bad, and he got better as the season went on versus the unknown commodity McDonald. For me, I kind of see McDonald as, when I watched the Ravens defense, it was so detailed, so complex in terms of disguising things that I was like, whoa, like this defense is so well coached. And that gives me so much confidence in him to take that defense with him. Now, whether his offense isn't good, I think his defense will be good enough to win a lot of games. I know what that means is people forget that during the last few years of Pete Carroll and what he had in offensive wise and everything they had there, their offense was very bad. Their defense was even worse in terms of schematics. It was honestly, you knew what they were going to be in. They're going to be in the cover 3. They're going to be in very vanilla like defense. Nothing was very unique to it. It was kind of like Pete Carroll and his defensive staff just really wasn't inclined to what the NFL is doing and disguising and adding cover 4, cover 2 looks, going cover 1 and stuff like that. So seeing McDonald and what he did with the Ravens, they led in almost every category statistically that you want to be leading for a defense. Run defense, passing defense, pressuring the quarterbacks. Like they know how to do that. And when you look at what he did to a lot of the best teams in the NFL, he put them in handcuffs and he sort of made them not be able to run their offense. What he did to the Niners on Christmas Day, that was extremely impressive. So for me, I think what I've seen from him with the Ravens and how detailed he is, I think he's going to be just as detailed as a head coach. Now, offensively, Ryan Grubb, I thought that was a phenomenal hire for him to bring Ryan Grubb back to Washington, back to that area and say, hey, you know what? You like the area, come back, be an offensive coordinator for the NFL instead of going to Alabama, which I was kind of skeptical on why he did that. Now, that's a different topic, but shout out to Ryan Grubb, a really unique offensive mind who he has a quarterback that's capable of doing well. And Geno Smith's shown that he's capable of being a good quarterback in the league. Not that he's going to be anything above average or an elite quarterback, but with the weapons he has, DK, there are 2 receivers that they have, Jackson Smith, Najigba, as well as Tyler Lockett, 2 good running backs, a good tight end, and Noah Fant. I think Ryan Grubb could get the best of that offense, and that offense could be good enough if the defense puts things together like I think they can. I think Mike Macdonald is going to have a really good year as a first year head coach. So that's my number 2. The one I'm curious on is 1 and 2 and how we have those connected. Do you want me to go first on 2, or do you want to go first?
I'll say one last thing because I actually really like the point you brought up about Ryan Grubb. Curious to see. That's also a reason, funny enough, why I have Gannon at 3, just because it's 1 year proven. I thought he had a good choice at OC with Drew Petzing, had the number 4 rushing attack in the NFL. You know, like I said, it's important to nail the offensive side. I thought they did well there. Curious to see how it grows. I want to hear yours first because you're always kind of controversial when it comes to 1 and 2s.
Oh, yeah,
especially
okay.
when
You
it comes
like
to things about the Niners.
Controversial.
I want to hear yours first before I ground you and kind of, think put some perspective into it.
See, that's why I like Rohan, man. He wants to try to humble me after I give some wild take or something like that. Like it's gonna be a wild take. But for me, the reason why so I get what you're saying with the year difference, like how Gannon did have that 1 year experience. For me, I'm kind of going back and looking at Gannon and looking at him as a defensive coordinator versus McDonald. And I think McDonald is a better defense coordinator, more detailed. So I think that's going to be a little bit better for him in year 1 versus what Jonathan Gannon was. But I think, like you're saying, the unknown of McDonald, you could have, like, for me, I totally see why you preferred to have Gannon at 3. For me, number 2 is actually before I even say this, yes, I'm a Niners fan. Yes, every game day, everything, I root for that. My show's an extremely I don't give a biased take because I'm a Niners fan. And if that's what you're looking for on my shows or on Clutch Gene Sports, you're not going to get that from me. Now, I'll give you when I think something's extremely right, I'll give that to you. But Kyle Shanahan is the 2nd-ranked head coach in the division. And I could see why people, and Rohan starts to get a little chuckle. Look at him. He's already ready to make a comment because he's over here chuckling because he knows Niner fans aren't going to like that. As a head coach, really damn good coach. I think Niners have 2 of the top 5 head coaches in the NFL, in the NFC West. That is phenomenal to have. Now, I think Kyle Shanahan is a top 5 head coach. I don't think anyone out there could replace Kyle Shanahan if the Niners were to fire him. I think when people say fire Kyle Shanahan, it's a ridiculous take. I think that is one thing that needs to be said right now. Kyle Shanahan cannot be replaced by anyone in the NFL. He can be, but it's very limited. And I don't think anyone has a track record for the Niners to fire a Kyle Shanahan head coach. Now, his offense is constantly in the top 5. His defense, for the first time since 2018, fell out of the top 5 in certain categories. He is a damn good coach. But for me, there's some things that he struggles at. Game management, I feel like he struggles at. He hasn't been able to win that big game So when you're looking at things, you have to take that into consideration and not being able to win a Super Bowl. So for me, Kyle Shanahan's the second ranked head coach. Now we could go on about his offense and how a lot of teams run the Kyle Shanahan offense in the NFL, but a lot of teams actually aren't running the Kyle Shanahan offense anymore. They've taken Kyle's offense and they've added wrinkles to it. They're a lot more 11 personnel rather than 21 personnel. They're doing a lot more different, unique things that Kyle hasn't added to his offense. You're starting to see Kyle add some things, and Kyle is such a unique mind that I think he will eventually add a lot of that 11 personnel, and that's why he added an extra receiver or two in the draft. But for me, there's just still too many question marks. That big game that he hasn't been able to win, game management, certain situations when he gets to the big game planning, I felt like hasn't been great. He's not using his quarterback to the best of his ability. He now has a great young quarterback, and yet through the first three quarters, has only thrown the ball 17th in the NFL, 32nd throw the entire game of all four quarters. So there's a lot of question marks where I see Kyle Shanahan. I think he's a phenomenal, like I said, a top 5 head coach, but I can't put him over Sean McVay yet. Sean McVay has that ring. He has the offense. He went out and got rid of Jared Goff, got a quarterback in Mathew Stafford, won a Super Bowl right away. His offenses are always winning. Last year, a bunch of people were writing them off as being a very bad team. His team was in a much better situation than people thought they were going to be in. He understands how to coach game management. I think Sean McVay is one of the best 5 coaches in the NFL, just like Kyle Shanahan. He has the ring, and that's what puts him over the edge on Kyle Shanahan. Now, Kyle's gone to 2 of those. He hasn't been able to win one of them. Sean McVay has, and I think that's the difference from McVay to Kyle, and I'm very curious if Rohan, if you have the same ranking or if you have Kyle Shanahan at 1.
And this is interesting because, usually Marco's the one siding on the 49ers kind of side, not necessarily because he's not because of a bias or something, because he usually has an extra edge that, the Niners rightfully so have. And I think this time it's going to be flipped because I actually have Kyle Shanahan ranked over Sean McVay when I'm talking about NFL head
Oh, wow.
coaches. And my reasoning goes a little different. And the reason is I don't know how much you loop. I think a lot of what you said is correct in the sense that you can talk about, game management. You can talk about the way, you can talk about the different ways that both operate as head coaches, where a lot of people prefer McVay's aggressive approach and things like that. To me, though, I have to point to one thing, which is what happens when the two teams play against each other when they have equal amount of talent. They've had similar talent, year after year, and
Great
I
point. This
understand
is a damn good point.
that the 49ers and the Rams, the 49ers did not get the best of the Rams when it came to the playoffs. And maybe that fuels Marco's point. When it comes to the big time moment, Sean McVay can outcoach Kyle Shanahan. But every time that Kyle Shanahan goes up against the Rams, you see the 49ers pretty much winning. The one win, really, that you can point to was the one in week 18 when the 49ers started Sam Donald. Apart from that, Kyle Shanahan has dominated the head to head kind of matchup between him and Sean McVay. And a lot of people, I know it's not a 1v1, but a lot of people point to that matchup. Who can scheme better against the opponent, knowing that the other head coach knows exactly what you're going to do? Maybe that's qualities of an offensive coordinator, but to me, I think when I'm talking specifically about these two, it's different than when I compare other head coaches just because they have such a dynamic and such a big head to head kind of record against each other. And so to me, that's where I'm going to initially point to. That's where we've seen Kyle Shanahan get the upper hand. That's the reason that I'm ultimately going to go with the 49ers because both coaches know what the other guy wants to do. Both coaches are
Absolutely.
actively involved on both sides of the game plan on every single week. Shanahan finds a way to, out best his kind of his buddy and Sean McVay. I do think that they are both high end NFL coaches. Probably, if you were ranking, probably would be in my top 7. And I it's a very tough debate because I think one thing I personally value significantly when it comes to head coach rankings is the ring. And that's the one thing Kyle Shanahan doesn't have that Sean McVay has that a lot of people put Sean McVay over Kyle Shanahan for. And I completely understand that because I think every coach that I have above Kyle Shanahan has a championship ring. And that's why I really loved it when we had Pete Carroll in these debates because you'd have a trio of head coaches that people consider top 10 head coaches. How would you rank them? Carroll also had the ring. And so With that said, I'm going to go with Shanahan over McVay. I do think it's apples to oranges. I think that you could definitely understand the argument of McVay over Shanahan as well, given the history they've had. That's my reason for it.
No, yeah, you absolutely bring up a good point when it comes to Kyle Shanahan teams normally beating Sean McVay. But the thing I would push back on is that's the regular season. Now, Sean McVay beat Kyle Shanahan in the NFC Championship game to go on and win a Super Bowl, I believe. I believe it was he went on and won that Super Bowl the year that the Niners beat the Rams beat them in the NFC Championship. That could have been the year the Niners matched up with, I believe, was it the Bengals, I believe, that the Rams beat? So the Niners could have matched up with the Bengals, and they probably beat the Bengals as well. So essentially, Sean McVay beat Kyle Shanahan to get a ring. So like for me, that's where I put a lot of weight into the playoffs and the ring. But I do believe what McVay's done, and I know a lot of people say McVay is a Kyle Shanahan a coach. He's not. He's a Mike Shanahan coach. He's never was under Kyle Shanahan while Kyle Shanahan was a head coach. He was under his father, Mike. But what I do like that McVay has done is gone a little more unique and a little more pass heavy in the 11 personnel and got a lot of more, I would say, gutsy when it comes to calling the games and a really aggressive mentality. But like you're saying, there's very close. You understand? I could see why you have Kyle Shanahan over Sean McVay. Very two really good coaches, that'll be around for a long time as long as McVay doesn't leave for the media, like has been talked about in the past. I don't see it happening, but if he does, he would be a great media guy. Him and Kyle, I think he has more of a personality than Kyle when it comes to media. So I'm very excited to see how they go up head to head because they have two good quarterbacks. And with the quarterback rankings in the NFL, I think you and I both have Geno Smith at 4. I could be wrong. You may have Kyler Murray there. But at 4, I have Geno Smith to start our quarterback rankings for the NFC West.
I have Brock. No, I'm kidding. At 4,
I could see you having that because you like to be controversial. I could see you doing that just to get an uproar from the fan base, Rohan. I could see that. You typically like to do that.
No, I do have Geno Smith at 4, and I think that this is probably, when you talk about quarterbacks, the division that has some of the strongest quarterbacks in the NFL. I think you can make an argument that each of the 4 guys are arguably in the top 15. Probably can more safely say in the top 20, but I'd have Geno Smith at 4.
Yeah, and then this division when it comes to quarterback, like to be honest, Geno could go to a lot of teams and be a starting quarterback. Even though he's at 4 for the NFC West, he could be a starting quarterback for a lot of teams. Now, at 3, I had Kyler Murray. I think Kyler Murray is a damn good quarterback when fully healthy. Now, his issue is obviously the interior offensive line needs to be great. He ability to see over the line, has like the jokes and stuff are there. Being a smaller quarterback, I think he has a nice rocket of an arm. He's accurate. It's not just a strong arm. I feel like he's really accurate with the ball. The ability to run is there. I think he's a really good quarterback, man. The only reason why I have him at 3 is because the unknown on how he's truly back from that ACL. Now, last year, returning, I thought he looked really healthy. I thought he looked really good. Should be a fun pairing with him and Marvin Harrison Jr., man. I'm excited to see that combo. As much as I don't want to see it in the NFC West, I'm excited to see Kyler Murray have a legit receiver. Obviously, back when his last legit receiver I could think of was Larry Fitzgerald, and they only played together, a year or 2?
D-Hop. They had D-Hop for a short period. But I guess
a short period.
Yeah.
But it was such a short period of time, and I felt like at that time, isn't that when right after Kyler got hurt, like right after?
Yeah.
Was it not? Yeah. So like for me, it's like that is disrespectful of me to not give D-Hop his props, but like he hasn't had no true receiver where he's fully healthy. Marvin Harrison, young, gets to grow with him. I like Michael Wilson over there as well. They have Dortch, the good young receivers, good tight end. I'm curious to see how that offense comes together with Kyler Murray at that quarterback position. I did see someone talk about Trey McBride, talk about how this is the most confident he's ever seen Kyler Murray. Really good quarterback, but at 3 for me now.
I agree. I think Kyler Murray is at 3. And I think that this is where you truly get into the top 15 range. I think Murray is a top 15 quarterback for sure. Top 10 when healthy. We've seen him be the dynamic weapon that he is in the past. Obviously, the Cardinals, they've had success. And you're right. You're wanting that number one option because even when D Hop was there, he had one true full season with the Cardinals, and that one year he had like 1,400 yards. The other 2 years he played like 9, 10 games. He played only half a season. Murray obviously gets the ACL injury and things like that, and now he's back to having a true wide receiver one with Marvin Harrison Jr. Still a young type of group. You want the offensive line to continue to build. But Arizona's doing a good thing. I mean, they got a lot going for them over there. We'll see how they can develop. And Kyler Murray, you're hoping for that true bounce back year this year after coming back midway last year, and now it's clear he's the quarterback of the future for them.
And then I really like what the Cardinals did, man. For Kyler Murray, right, getting Tip as well at the tight end position. But my favorite part was adding Trey Benson to the running back room. Like that's like, if you want to keep a quarterback healthy, run the ball and run it efficiently. Obviously, they have James Conner there, who's been a really solid running back. But adding Trey Benson, who's arguably the best running back in the draft class last year or the past draft. So I like what they did for him. Now I'll let you go QB2 and then QB1 first before I do it because I want you to be able to go first on this topic.
Yeah, so QB2, QB1, I think it's pretty close as well. I think both guys you can find an argument for inside the top 10. I think safely, like I said, all these guys you could probably place inside the top 15 when you talk about these top three guys. For me, though, two, I'm going to go with Brock Purdy and one Mathew Stafford. I've kind of been on the Mathew Stafford train for a long time. He's kind of been one of my favorite quarterbacks in the NFL from his Detroit days, just because he was underappreciated there. Obviously, comes to Los Angeles, he gets a ring. And I think, though, if we're talking 1 year from now, this is probably the time where you could probably see a flip. I'm not going to go there yet, but Stafford, he's older, has the injury issues with the back that he's kind of dealt with, but he's obviously played through a lot of things. To me, at the moment, though, I'm going to have Purdy at 2, Stafford at 1, just because when you look for a win now quarterback, that's kind of the way that I view these rankings. Right now, who is the guy that you kind of go for? I'd prefer Matthew Stafford to win a championship over Brock Purdy. Purdy, I'd say, is more athletic, can probably improvise a little better. Stafford is just the better passer in a lot of categories, and so that's the reason I'd go with Stafford at 1. But that's pretty high praise for both because Matthew Stafford to me is like a top 7 option, maybe top 8 option in the NFL at quarterback. Purdy to me is around fringe top 10, and so I think that both quarterbacks are probably in the range of being quarter or championship caliber quarterbacks. Obviously, we'll see if that can come to fruition for Brock Purdy. I'm gonna have Purdy at 2, Stafford at 1, though.
And I would agree with that ranking. And the reason why I went with you first, because I didn't want to be the dude who goes back to back and has a 49er second over a Ram person. Because I knew you were going to do that with me
because
knowing.
You're controversial. You are
No.
controversial.
The thing is, again, Matthew Stafford is a damn good quarterback. He gets a lot of flack because he was with the Lions for a long time and he couldn't do much with the Lions. However, when you're with a bad organization at that time, there's not much you could do. Now, when you watch Matthew Stafford, I'm not going to say Brock can't do any of this, but the arm angles that he's able to do, the arm strength, the ability to, and I think it's the ability that he's given at the line of scrimmage to do a lot more. And I feel like it shows on weekly Sundays the arm talent, the ability of him as a quarterback in the playoffs. Now, I think Brock is right there, right there, pounding on that top 10. I think he's one more season and he's in the top 10 at that high level of play. For me, I'm only going Matthew Stafford over Brock Purdy because he's done it for so long. Now, if Brock Purdy had done it for another year, and we're like you said, next year when we're doing this ranking, if Brock has another season like that, there's a good chance that I have Brock in my top 7 quarterbacks. I think right now he's a top 12 quarterback. When a lot of people are like, "Oh, you're such a hater," a top 12 quarterback is a legit quarterback in the NFL. Like most teams would want a top 12 quarterback because they're most likely making the playoffs year in, year out. So with Brock Purdy being number 2, I don't think it's any disrespect to him. I think if anything, it's high praise for him, man. Being ranked there with the quarterback who was drafted number 1 overall and Matthew Stafford, and you were drafted with the last pick, that speaks volumes to how good of a quarterback you've been in the NFL. And I think the ability, the scramble ability and stuff like that. But again, Matthew Stafford has a ring. Brock Purdy, if he would have won that Super Bowl against the Chiefs, I probably have him ahead of Matthew Stafford, to be honest with you, just because doing that in your first full year starting like that in that fashion, it's kind of very like convincing. Like, holy shit. Like he just do what he did in the Super Bowl? I thought he played well. I didn't think he played bad. And he didn't play great. He needed to play great to win that Super Bowl, and he didn't. That's no knock on him. I think that's more on Kyle Shanahan, and I think that's why I have Kyle Shanahan at 2. But man, the Niners are in a better situation at the quarterback situation in the quarterback room because Brock is so young, and we're likely to see Matthew Stafford retiring within the next, what would you say, 2-3 years?
Probably, yeah.
Because he's 36, has a lot of back injuries. However, I do give props to the Rams because they know he has back injuries, and they upped their entire interior of their offensive line. They went out and got Kevin Dotson. They got Jonah Jackson to help out.
Yeah.
So he may be upright, and if he's fully healthy, that's a dangerous team. So I get why you have him at 1. I have them at 1 as well. Throwback says, so you don't have 49ers W the NFC West, Rohan? Well, thanks for leading us to the next segment because the NFC West ranking and prediction, it's kind of the way you rank them in a way is kind of how you may predict the NFC West to be won or lost. Rohan, you want to go first at 4?
Yeah, I think at 4 it's still pretty clear. I think they're still a little bit away with the Arizona Cardinals at 4. I think the Seattle Seahawks could be a part of this mix as well. I think that right now, like it's kind of like a 2-part battle with the top 2 vying, at the top of the division, and the bottom 2 in the middle kind of race overall in the NFC. The Cardinals, they're improving. Don't get me wrong; they are 100% improving. You definitely
and they had a damn good draft class.
Oh yeah, and you definitely see a team that you can see these pieces kind of being put together overall. You have Kyler Murray at quarterback. You got your number 1 receiver with Marvin Harrison. You have the offensive line that's kind of still building along. You've got a defense that really you started to grow, be it in free agency or in the draft. And I think that there are a lot of pieces, for this team that you can definitely understand. I just think right now they're still a little bit away. Wouldn't be surprised if they end up being 3rd because, like I said when I was talking about Jonathan Gannon, this team's competitive. They're competitive. I wouldn't be surprised if they could pull out some close games, some upsets and things like that. But at the moment, we'll have them at 3rd.
So I agree. I have the Cardinals at 4. Yeah, I have the Cardinals at 4 as well. And the reason I feel like they're a very young team, right? When you have that many draft picks in a draft class, and even last year they had a lot of young players playing, but they'll probably be starting Max Mountain at the cornerback position, Darius Robinson, a defensive end who's probably playing inside a certain situation. They're a really good player. They also drafted, I believe, who should get some reps, Xavier Thomas. I wouldn't be surprised if he's getting a lot of reps by mid-season to late towards the end of the season. Running back room, really good running back room. Their offense should be ahead of the curve. I think their offense is going to be better than their defense. And if that is the case, they could push for 3. But I just think when you have the Seattle Seahawks who have a really good offense, their O-line is solid, their quarterback is solid, good receivers, good running back room. I think they have a better offensive coordinator than Ryan Grubb, even though we haven't seen him at the NFL level. At the college level, he's been phenomenal. So I have Cardinals at 4, the Seahawks at 3. And the reason I have the Seahawks at 3 is I just feel like their coaching staff can get more out of what they have. And when you look at the Seattle Seahawks, I feel like they have a much better roster than people give them credit for. If they had a better quarterback, I think that team could be a dangerous team in the playoffs or making the playoffs and getting after teams. If you look at their defensive line, Leonard Williams, Jaron Reed, Dramont Jones, who they had signed from Denver last year, adding Byron Murphy, who in my opinion was the best defensive player in the draft class, Boye Mafe. They signed Buffalo and Miami's linebackers. I think a lot of good talent on that defense. Their secondary, Witherspoon, Woolen, Julian Love, Rashawn Jenkins. they have a really talented defensive roster. And when you pair that with a good defensive mind like Mike McDonald, I think they could make noise and possibly be that third team in the NFC West to make the playoffs. I think they're a little bit ahead of the Cardinals just because of the experience from those two different teams in terms of Cardinals are being a much younger team. And I think Mike McDonald will have his team better coached.
Yeah, no, I think that that's a good argument. And like I said, I think this team, it's funny. I think 2 years ago, this team was underrated. They made the playoffs, and then they were a little overrated, with some people even saying they could win the division last year. You take the step back, and now you're back to the underrated level. New head coach, you got a couple of things, a couple of changes. Don't forget though, this team still has all of their top three weapons. They've got a new offensive coordinator who has thrived when you have those three weapons in an aerial passing attack that Geno Smith likes. You still got Kenneth Walker, who had an injury last year. He's going to be back. The offensive line, you're hoping that that's kind of the key to this team. If they're healthy, you're better. But if they're not healthy, you're probably going to struggle like you did last year. Defense, it's up and down, but you have the pieces. It depends. Can Tariq Woolen have a bounce back year? How does Devin Witherspoon take the second step after having a good, rookie year? You've got the interior pieces: Leonard Williams, Byron Murphy. How do they look? But overall, I think this team, they look, they look pretty good.
Who do you think is at 2-1? I think this to me is very interesting, right? Because most people probably have the Niners at 1, and I guess I'll go first, and because most people probably have the Niners at 1, but I truthfully believe this one's a coin flip. And I'll let you go first because I know you probably have to head out soon, so I'll let you go first.
Interesting that you say it's a coin flip, and I'll be curious to hear your thoughts. I honestly don't think it's a coin flip. I think the Niners are the number one team. And this is no slight at the Rams. I just think the Niners' talent is overwhelming and the best. They're the most talented team right now in the NFL. There's a reason that even though they lost the Super Bowl, that they're the number one Super Bowl favorites. I think that they should be the favorites for the one seed in the NFC. The only thing that might hold them back is their schedule and ultimately, obviously, injuries. To me, when you look at it, the Rams, they're solid. They've got Mathew Stafford, who you're hoping can have a full year healthy, but you don't know if that ultimately will be the case. Kyron Williams is, a top tier running back. Cooper Kupp, Puka Nakua, that's a really good 1-2 duo. The O line significantly improved with Jonah Jackson, Kevin Dotson. But I think for me, you miss out. You're missing out on Aaron Donald. I know they got a couple of young guys. Kobe Turner, Braden Fisk, obviously. You still have Byron Young, who was a really good revelation last year, almost a rookie of the year type candidate. And then you got Jared Verse. But to me, I think that that's going to be a significant, a part of your defense that you're going to miss. And it'll take a little bit of time for these young guys to develop. Curious to see how the defense goes. They did have some nice signings with Tre'Davious White and Darius Williams, but this is a team that feels like it's an injury away, and the ceiling of this team can kind of go. And you got a couple of guys who have dealt with some injuries, like Kupp's dealt with some. Tre'Davious White has dealt with a few of his own. Stafford's dealt with his own. And I think the Niners' talent pool is better. So that's why I go with them as the 1, the Rams as the 2, with both teams making the playoffs.
So for me, the reason why I think both teams make the playoffs, but the reason why I have it as a coin flip is when you look at the Rams, right? Their offense, their O line is majorly improved. They have good tight ends.
Oh, yeah.
They have 2 good tight ends, in my opinion, or not good. I should say solid tight ends. Their receiver room, phenomenal. I think if Cooper Kupp's fully healthy, probably one of the best receiver rooms in the NFL with Puka and Cooper Kupp. Kyron Williams, and then they drafted Blake Corum to kind of whenever Kyron is a little gassed, they have someone to come in and actually run the ball and get production out of. And they're obviously gonna miss the presence of Aaron Donald, but when you draft Jared Verse, Braden Fisk, you're hoping those guys step up. Obviously, you're 1, but not even that. I think when you look at their roster, Byron Young, Kobe Turner, I believe last year had 9 sacks. So even though they do have a big hole to fill, I think their secondary, if Tre'Davious White is fully healthy, I know he's battled a lot of injuries. If he's fully healthy, he should play a bigger part in having that secondary be good. Darius Williams coming back from Jacksonville. I know he was with them before. They also have the kid from Miami. They drafted Cameron Kinchins to go
Yeah.
along with Cameron Curl, who they signed from Washington. So their secondary is improved, in my opinion. So when you're looking at their roster, yeah, they did lose Aaron Donald, but they improved in categories where they knew their defense was going to take a big hit. So what did they go out and do? They improved their offensive line so their offense could carry their team. And when you're when you're looking at their roster, if their offense can carry their team, they have a good enough defense, in my opinion, to knock the Niners off in a game or two. And I think that's what's going to come down to is when they play head to head. What happens when the Niners play the Rams? Now, I think the Niners end up coming out on top. I think the Niners win the division, but I think it could come down to who has the better offensive line and who has the better quarterback. Because if the Niners can't get after the quarterback and Mathew Stafford is just picking them apart, and we've seen Mathew Stafford do that to plenty of teams, you're probably going to have a tough day at the office. Now, I'm not saying that the Rams could slow down the Niners offense because no team truthfully can. So for me, that's where I think it's a coin flip on who has the better team. I think it's, even though the Niners have the better known players and the deeper roster, and not deeper roster, but the top end talent for their starting offense and defense is better and more known. I think that the Rams have a lot of talent on their roster that just isn't being talked about. For example, when people talk about losing Aaron Donald, they talk about it as Aaron Donald was the entire team. And I know you're losing one of the best defensive players to ever play the game. But the way they drafted, I felt like they did a good enough job to make up for losing Aaron Donald and signing the secondary and getting better there. So it just depends on their health. But I think Niners are at 1, the Rams are at 2. But I think it's a coin flip to win the division, to be honest with you. I think whenever we play them, I think we play them early in the season and then later in the season, I think those 2 games will dictate the 49ers and the NFC West. So that's where I have them. I think really good Rams team, dude. Really good Rams team, but I just think the Niners just are a lot better offense, a lot better defense. Obviously, they have much better talent. Like you mentioned, you probably thought I was going to have the Rams at 1 for a second, didn't you?
It crossed my mind. You said it's a coin flip. You said it's a coin flip. So
how to have you fool? How to have you on your edge of your seat? Because if I would have had the Rams at all 3 of those spots at ranked 1, you probably would have been like, "See, I told you." But no, I have the Rams at 2. I have the Niners at 1 for which team has a better overall team. So that's where I have them. I don't think it's that big of a drastic drop from them. I do think the Niners win the division, but it's going to be hard. I think both the NFC West is a tough division when it comes to their teams. Every team's going to be competitive. But that's it. NFC West rankings. If you guys want to go back, you can watch quarterbacks, head coach ranking, team ranking. Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel at Clutch Jeans Sports on YouTube. Go to Rohan Chakravarty's personal channel and subscribe there as well. Thank you guys all for tuning in today's episode. I know it was supposed to be with Ashley Ariana. I should be live with her Friday. Rohan, any plans for the rest of the week? I know originally we didn't have this plan, but last minute.
Originally was thinking Friday. We'll see if we still do the Friday one. If so, it'll be a 3-show week. If not, we'll catch up next week. But definitely a fun one today. A little bit off of our normal course, but we like the ranking ones, and the NFC West definitely has, some intriguing rankings inside of it with all the different ones that we did today.
And if you like topics that aren't just 49ers, this is what I'm probably going to be doing more often. I will have Niner segments or Niner talks at least once or twice a week. But during the week, I want to have at least 2 to 3 shows where it is the entire NFL or a division that I'm talking about. So make sure you guys hit that subscribe button for that as well. Rohan, thanks for joining today. I know it was last minute. I appreciate you, my man. Make sure you guys have a great Wednesday night. Stay hydrated. Peace.